What's up, everybody? Welcome to Take No Offense. A couple of old friends who grew up together in central Pennsylvania. Now we live on opposite sides of the country. So this is our chance to get together once a week to talk about politics, news, sports, and entertainment. I'm Eric Messersmith in the Los Angeles area. Brian Johnson is in suburban Washington, D.C. What's up, buddy? Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you, buddy. What are you thankful for this year?
Wow. That's the usual stuff. I mean, the cliche answer. I know where you're going with that, but I appreciate the joke.
Yeah.
The honest cliche answer is the usual stuff,
Really?
family, health, friends, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I talked to Sebastian a good bit today about gratitude. It is
Very
good.
important. It is good.
I learned it later in life.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's hard in the moment, but I'll tell you, it is, if you do that, if you do practice gratitude, as they say, it does make life a lot better. I'm grateful that Matt Gaetz is not going to be the attorney general. By the way,
Yeah, I owe you
I
a
called it
dollar.
last week. You owe me $1. I didn't think it would be that quick that Gaetz would bow out. I guess we'll start there. Look, I said everything we're doing now between now and January 20th is reading the tea leaves. We don't know. Nobody knows exactly. I don't even think Trump knows exactly what he's going to do. But I will say, reading the signs, as bad of a sign as it was that Gaetz was nominated in the first place, I think it was a pretty good sign that he was pulled and pulled so quickly. Why? Because I think that shows you, A, that the Republicans in the Senate have some juice. Like that showed you that, okay, Trump probably will have a pretty wide berth in terms of what he can do, but he can't do anything. And Matt Gaetz was thankfully a bridge too far, even for the Senate Republicans. And to have it come down that unequivocal, that quickly, I think was a good sign that Senate Republicans may have a little more fight and a little more pushback than maybe people have given them credit for. And also that Trump's responsive to that. Like he could have just dug in his heels and said, no, I want Gaetz. We're going to go to the mat for this.
I thought he
Now,
would.
I think he realized how terrible that would have been, how ugly that would have gotten. And so he made the right move, the strategic move, the smart move. So I think that shows you, again, we're looking for tea leaves here. Nobody knows anything for sure, but I like the fact that Republicans were able to push back so aggressively and that Trump was responsive to that. And I hope, as someone who would like to see, let's just say Trump's more extreme impulses reined in this second term, that gives me a little bit more hope than I had a week ago.
Yeah, I owe you a dollar because it was unusual from the perspective that it would have been newsworthy for quite some time if he had stayed in there. And I honestly, all kidding aside, I love that he nominated him. Just not because I thought it was a good nomination, because I thought it was a middle finger. And I don't know what it says about me instinctively. Sometimes I like when that happens. So for him to just go like, okay, and then have Gaetz resign, I don't know if that's a good start for my president, honestly.
Yeah, I know you MAGA people are pretty upset about it, but the rest of us were like, all right, this shows you that the Republicans may be able to push back a little bit. Now, look, the rest of the cabinet nominees will probably all or mostly get confirmed. By the way, as they should. Like, are these the people I would have picked for this job? In most cases, no. But in some cases, certainly no. But but most of these nominees, there are a few exceptions. I think Tulsi Gabbard for DNI.
I knew you were going to say that.
I think RFK Jr. for Health and Human Services is a possible exception. Maybe Pete Hegseth at Defense for various reasons with those three. But outside of those three, I think the rest, and that I'm including Pam Bondi in this, who is the Matt Gaetz replacement as Attorney General. The rest of them fall under the banner of elections have consequences. So, like, you could vote. So, if I were in the Senate, I'd vote for all the other ones for sure, and I may vote for RFK Jr. and Hegseth as well. Probably not Gabbard. But my point is, elections have consequences, and this is what America voted for. And I think the president should have a very wide amount of leeway to pick and have his cabinet nominees confirmed. I think Gaetz was well outside of that wide leeway, but most of the rest of them are within the bounds of what you would expect from a Donald Trump administration.
What's your major issue with Gabbard? I mean, she was a military officer. She's a former Democrat. She left the party. And now she's, playing for the good guys, my team. Well, I don't so I'm saying I want to understand like what is your major
Well,
issue with Gabbard? Because I've heard her on various platforms, the major one being Joe Rogan, and I came away going like, okay, like I don't see anything insane there. I mean, we're not
my
talking about Matt Gaetz, who by the way is a
well,
joke, but
yeah,
anyway.
her issues obviously are a lot different than Matt Gaetz. I mean, to be fair to her, I'm not saying she's as bad as Gates. What I'm saying is that position, director of national intelligence, is the issue to me. It's not so much like if Tulsi Gabbard had been nominated for something else, I probably would have been like, well, wouldn't be my pick. But that position is the person who is in charge of the correlating all of our different intelligence agencies and producing products that then they can take to the president. That's a person who's got to have obviously the highest of highest security levels. And if you look at and this will come up in the hearing, I want to be clear. She deserves a hearing. Let her answer for her past comments. But the issue is recently she has been peddling Russian propaganda about the war in Ukraine. She has been very hesitant to criticize Russia in any way. She wouldn't say that Bashir al-Assad, if you go back and see the clips from some of those Democratic primary debates when she ran for president as a Democrat, let me check my notes, 4 years ago, not long ago, and Pete Buttigieg really embarrassed her, calling her out for her inability to call out Bashir al-Assad and say the president of Syria and say he committed war crimes, even though he had literally just gassed his own people, including children, killing many of them. And she wouldn't condemn him. She went and met with him, had a photo op with him. I mean, again, to be the director of national intelligence and show that kind of a stunning lack of judgment, that kind of just a lack of moral clarity when it comes to to Russia and the Russia-Ukraine war, peddling the Putin propaganda. I
Yeah,
just
she's been nuanced on that topic too. I get what you're saying, but
let's
like,
see. Well, let's see her in the confirmation hearing.
yeah.
As far as I know, she has never denounced her comments about Bashir al-Assad. She has never said he's a war criminal. She has never condemned him for using uh, gas on his own people. If you remember, that was the famous Obama red line that
Yeah.
Obama never actually did anything about back in the day when Obama was president. So okay, again, give her a chance. Let's hear her out. But I have my questions. That's the one that I probably would vote
I
against.
was
Oh,
really interested to know because I see like I don't know every position she has on everything, but like I like her. She strikes me as a competent individual who's like, doing the best she can out here, and she's achieved a lot. So that's why I asked.
all right, fair enough. Well, I would expect you to defend her
Of
as a
course.
hardcore MAGA acolyte. All right, Brian, let's talk about another sign. We're talking about the signs of the Trump administration. We had another big one yesterday, and it came via Truth Social. Donald Trump saying that he is going to impose on day one a
Yeah.
25% tariff on Canada and Mexico until such time as those two countries crack down on the illicit drug trade, particularly fentanyl and also immigration. I have several takes on this. I guess starting with why are we lumping Canada with Mexico? Like, I mean, in terms of illegal immigration, Canada is a
No.
drop in the bucket compared to Mexico. I don't know the exact numbers of the
I don't
amount of
think the
fentanyl that
Canadians want to come here.
right. I don't know the exact numbers in terms of the amount of fentanyl coming across each border, but I can't imagine it's anywhere close in Canada as in Mexico. But I wanted, as a MAGA defender, I wondered your thoughts on this tariff. Are you excited to be paying more for all of these items that are going to be coming in from Canada and Mexico?
No, but it's an interesting question. Like we know what the outcomes are, but I'd throw it back to you and say how he's going about this, particularly as it has to do with illegal drugs coming in and fentanyl. Don't you think that's a smart approach to justify the reason for it?
I am anti-fentanyl. I want to be clear on that.
It's
I think
important. Yeah.
so I want to stipulate that up front. I think we should crack down on that. I think this falls under the idea of I hope he's not serious. Like this is where the people who
Hmm.
defend him, I want to hear them. This is where they say, and I just saw someone on TV today talking about this, basically saying, well, he's just using this as a negotiating tactic. right? Where he's just throwing this out there. Mexico or Canada will throw him some type of small bone that really won't move the needle, and he'll declare victory and pull it back. And if that happens, then fine. It's kind of like the other stuff we talked about with Trump. There's a gap sometimes between what he says and what he actually does.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I will judge him on what he does. Right now, all I have is what he says, right? So if that's the case, if he's just using this for leverage or a negotiating tool, then fine, whatever. Say whatever you want. I don't give a shit. If he actually does it, it would be a disaster. I mean,
I don't think we can dispute that.
Mexico, I saw some of these numbers today. This is from CNN.com. In July, crude oil imports to the United States from Canada hit 4.3 million barrels per day. Gas prices estimated to go up between 25 and 75 cents per gallon if this tariff goes into effect. $44.1 billion worth of agricultural products were imported from Mexico in 2022, including 90% of all avocados in America.
I love avocados.
$44.76 billion worth of vehicles came from Mexico to the U.S. in 2023, not to mention the component parts for many other cars that are ultimately assembled in the United States. Long story short, this would be economically a disaster, particularly for low-income people, would raise prices on pretty much everything across the board. Mexico's our number one trading partner. Canada is number three. Currently, all these items flow across our borders with basically no tariffs as part of first NAFTA and then the trade agreement that Trump helped renegotiate, which was essentially just our NAFTA redo or re-up. It didn't really change the fundamentals. And that is actually very beneficial for all three of our countries. We have very integrated supply chains. And so again, this is a terrible idea. If it ever happens, it will go under the category of be careful what you wish for. Like Trump said, again, maybe he won't do it. He said he was going to do this. And not just on Mexico and Canada, but everybody else. And if you've read anything about the history of tariffs throughout the United States, I would just implore people to Google the Smoot-Hawley tariff. It's a long time ago. Let's just say things did not end well. That was in 1930. The Great Depression was just beginning. This helped accelerate it. Tariffs do not have a very strong, they sound great on paper, right? Protect American industry, right? Protect American jobs, bring in revenue, but in practice, they usually end very poorly. So, but look, maybe the people who say he doesn't really mean it are right. That's what I'm hoping.
What I hear is that you're pro fentanyl. That's all I'm hearing as you're talking is that you want fentanyl to flow over the border into our communities. But I mean, whatever, man. I don't mind paying 75 cents more per gas to save my fellow Americans, but you do.
That's well, and your your grocery store trip, if it costs you another 100, well, we know that. Look, you can afford it, right? We know that. But I'm talking about the app. Put yourself in the shoes of the.
It's hard for me, but
it's very.
I'll try. And look, all kidding aside, I think you and I agree on this issue. I think it would be a bad idea. I also love this idea that my president is somehow playing chess and everyone else is playing checkers in terms of negotiating. Like, we know how these things go. Yeah, and really I do think it's a bad idea. I also think you can simultaneously do some things at the same time. You cannot have an outrageous 25% tariff and also limit the amount of fentanyl that comes in the United States.
Right.
Like, look, I think that's possible.
It is possible. And we could
I don't mean to sound like AOC. I'm just saying that I think you can do those things at the same time.
Of course you can. And also Mexico and Canada will just call the bluff. I mean, Mexico came out and said today, well, we'll just reciprocate because of course they will. That's what always happens with tariffs. You don't get to just do it to other countries. And guess who that hurts then? All of our exporters, who particularly farmers and other manufacturers who export a ton of goods to Mexico and Canada every year. So yeah, it would be it's filed under the be careful what you wish for the people who really supported Trump, because I think I want to be careful I say this. There's a lot of people on all sides of politics who vote in elections who really don't follow the issues closely. I think I'm safe saying that. If you look at any study,
you're safe.
People, very safe in saying that. So that is not exclusively a Trump thing. I want to be absolutely clear on that. But I do not think the vast majority of people who voted for Trump really want the effects of what massive tariffs would bring. And I think Trump is smart enough, hopefully, to respond to that and will act accordingly, meaning he will never do it. Or if he does do it, he will quickly reverse course because he will see what the real world consequences of it would be, which would be very bad.
I think this is important too, as it applies to my president, is that if there aren't a lot of people behind it, then he won't do it. Like the idea of building the wall, that basically came from Twitter. And it was popular. And I would argue to an extent it got him into office. I think also the issue with immigration really propelled him in this election cycle.
Yeah,
But I also
absolutely.
don't think that there is a groundswell of support for tariffs. It's not cool. It's not a wall. Like I'm
Right.
serious.
No, I
And
think you're
I
right.
think these things matter to him.
Yeah, well, we'll find out how much they matter. And look, his immigration crackdown, which we know is coming, would have the effect of doing exactly what he's talking about,
Yeah.
which is reducing the number of people coming in and potentially
I
the
just think
number
it's
of
unlikely. I think there
illegal
are too many
drugs.
people around him and it's and I want to be clear. I don't think he's some clueless person. I think this plays well for him now, but I don't see it in real. In I just don't see
The
it.
the thing that makes me think that it might be real, because I generally tend to agree with you, but the thing about it is if you listen to Trump, there are certain things that he kind of brushes aside that you can tell he doesn't really think much about or care much about. Like healthcare is a good example. Remember, concepts of a plan. On abortion, he kind of was just saying whatever he needed to
Well,
say.
he
You could
did
tell
save Obamacare, so there's
that's
that.
that's right. You could tell he's not like that's not something he stays up at night thinking about. But on two issues, that there were it sounded like he was a true believer, and they were immigration and tariffs. Those are the two things that he has pounded relentlessly for years and sung their praises. And so that's why I'm not sure. I'm not sure which way he'll go on tariffs. I wanted to talk to you about Brian Jack Smith this week.
Oh yeah.
I do think this is interesting. We knew this was coming, but the special prosecutor officially dropped the charges for the January 6th case. That happened, I believe, yesterday. The judge signed off on that. And then the other case he was prosecuting, the documents case, that was on appeal in the federal appeals court. And he asked that that be essentially withdrawn. And now that appeal has essentially ended as well. So those two cases are now officially gone. The Justice Department has a longstanding policy that you can't prosecute a president, so there was no chance they were going to continue. We know Trump's strategy all along for these cases was delay, 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 and then win the election and have them go away. And you know what? It's exactly what happened.
Chess, Eric. We're playing checkers over here.
That's right.
I wanted to talk to you about this because I think this is one place that you and I may be the furthest apart, which is that I have always felt since he lost the election that going after him in all of these cases, whether it was, the hush money case or Russian interference at the time, like all of these different things that were, you know, I almost said drummed up. I mean, these are very real things, so I don't want to dismiss them. I just thought politically they were a bad idea. I thought it kept him relevant. I thought it kept him in the news. I think it made him a martyr. Uh, I would have preferred that he was washed with praise on how well that he did and given another television show on NBC, and then he would have been out of my life politically. But here we are, and this is no surprise for all the reasons that you think. I think they waited way too long to bring some of these cases forward, but I guess that's, with the benefit of hindsight. But you and I think, do disagree on this. No?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I guess you have to break it up into two parts. A, was it a bad idea strategically? And B, the merits of the actual cases. And I
Go
think
ahead.
we need to talk about those things separately. In terms of the strategy, look, because of the way it played out, I don't think there's any question it was a net positive for Trump. These indictments coming down, particularly in the primaries, really cemented his position as the Republican frontrunner. He probably would have won the nomination anyway,
Yeah.
but they rallied Republicans around him, I think, far more quickly than would have happened naturally. So you're right. If they were going to do it, Merrick Garland, who, by the way, is no hero to the left. I know
No.
Republicans love to hate him, but he waited a long time to go
Yeah.
down this road. And that is one of the reasons we are where we are. I think That said, these cases were brought in 2023. There was enough time to go through the process. And because of Trump's constant delays, and then because of the Supreme Court taking up the case on immunity and waiting so long to rule, and because of Eileen Cannon and her ridiculous ruling that the special counsel was unconstitutional, which basically no other judge believes
No.
that except maybe Clarence Thomas. But because of those things, they never got to trial. So when you say they're bad strategy, you're right in how it played out. But we'll never know the alternate universe, which is, okay, let's say they went to trial and he was convicted, which I think on the documents case, he certainly would have been.
Oh no,
That was about as
that's
open and
why
shut as you could imagine. The January 6th case, I guess you could make a free speech argument. They would have tried that. Maybe he could have wiggled his way out of that, but I think he would have probably been convicted there too. So if it had played out differently, where those cases had gone to trial, and American people saw that evidence presented in the news every night, and then a jury found him guilty, I don't know how it plays out.
I do.
Maybe that helps him still. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered.
I do, because there are so many people who live outside of reality that it would have been a sham and a fraud and a witch hunt and everything else that he said. It's like Giuliani going through what he's going through right now. Like I don't know why, man. I feel bad for Rudy Giuliani. But like it's like this. I mean, does he deserve it? Yes, but also at the same time, yeah, he did. But anyway, let's go back to Trump just for what it's worth. I'm telling you, man, I saw this coming.
You did?
Because in America, we love it, man. We build you up, we tear you down, we build you back up. It's a tale as old as time. But the biggest thing is I don't like the idea, because you could say that it wasn't politics. You can say that, whether it's the, hush money case or January 6th or all these things, you can say they're not politically motivated. It's impossible for them not to appear as a politically motivated. And that's what matters the most, right? Is just because Trump is involved and he was the president, it is political. So I would have rather done the thing like they did with Richard Nixon. Just let him go.
Yeah, but the difference was, there's several differences.
Well,
First of all, Richard Nixon didn't try as like what Richard Nixon did was kind of peanuts compared to trying to overturn an election.
Well, he had no balls.
He tried. He covered up a break-in essentially, and used the powers of the presidency to intimidate people and lie and fabricate things, which is not good. I'm not defending. I'm not here to defend Richard Nixon. What I'm saying is it's a little different. Also, Nixon, when Ford pardoned him, was gone, never to come back. Right.
Right.
He had resigned the presidency.
I didn't say pardon Trump. That's why I'm saying I know
you
it's
said
hard
not
to
bring the charges. Yeah, right.
But just don't bring the charges. Let him go. In fact, I would have done the opposite thing. I would have invited him in. I would have made him feel like a king.
Yeah, I guess what you're talking about, though, is strategy, which I respect what you're talking about. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Although, again, I think we don't know what the strategy plays out, how it plays out if they go to trial. What I'm talking about is the principle. And to me, the biggest shame is lumping all the cases together. Like, one of the worst things that happened to the Trump prosecution was the New York case being brought, because when that was the weakest of the cases and the least serious of the cases, paying off hush money to conceal an affair before an election, you could argue about the merits. I think he was guilty. Do I think the case should have been brought? Probably not. But I think that case allowed everything to be tainted, especially when it was the only one that actually went to trial. Yeah. And so my point is, Trump at the end, the shame for me is that he got away with it when people like Rudy Giuliani, who essentially did the same things. Hell, Rudy Giuliani was acting on Trump's orders. Mark Meadows is still facing charges. Like, a lot of these people will face, some people have been disbarred. Some people have pled guilty already. They are facing consequences. And he, as the man who orchestrated it, who was the ringleader, has escaped all consequences. Now, I want to go back to the point I made on the show before. Ultimately, what he did after the election up through January 6th was, to me, more of a political crime than it was violating the criminal code. I'm not saying he didn't violate the criminal code. I think he probably did and probably would have been found guilty. But at base, he was derelict in his duties. His duties as president is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. I don't know how you could look at his conduct from election day 2020 through January 6th and say that a man who tried to seat fake electors, who tried to pressure local election officials, who summoned a mob to Washington D.C. that stormed the Capitol, who pressured his vice president to not certify the results, who called the Georgia Secretary of State and said, "Find me 11,000."
Find them.
I don't know how you could say that person was taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. Like, he should have been convicted in his impeachment trial. And if he had been, I don't know if the charges would have been brought or not, but he would have been ineligible for running again. But 7 Republicans voted, to their credit, to convict him. 7. They needed 10 more. He had 57 votes, 10 more. And I like Mitch McConnell, even though I don't agree with him politically on a lot of things, because I think he does care about the country, and I think he is kind of an institutionalist. But that, to me, was the greatest failure of Mitch McConnell, because he, at that time, had a lot more power than he does now within the party, a lot more sway. And if he had, and he essentially, on the speech that he gave after he voted to acquit, he essentially said Trump did it. I mean, he said, I believe the phrase he used was, Trump was morally responsible for what happened. And I mean, that speech was blistering, but yet he voted to acquit. And we know why he did it, because he was the Republican leader, and he didn't want to go against the majority of his party. But 7 Republicans voted for conviction. If McConnell had come out forcefully for it, I bet he could have persuaded several more. And then you might have gotten the 67. Trump would have been convicted, and this whole thing, it would have played out completely differently. But alas, here we are.
Well, the one thing you said, and I've had a lot of, I think, very healthy conversations over the years with a lot of smart people in business about this, is the word you said, which is principle. And I have often in the conversation landed on the portion where, and I don't know if you, as my best friend going back years, will find this shocking, I don't have a lot of principles. Like, I'm a strategic thinker. Like, you can toss your principles out the window. Like, at the end of the day, this is a zero-sum game in business. I want to fucking win. And if I have to cast my principles to the side to get that W, then that's what we're going to do, brother. Like, that's what's going to happen. And it's not that I don't have some admiration or respect for these people that are allowed to have these principles, but it's a dog-eat-dog world, man. And I don't mean to be cheesy and cliche, but I'm serious. I'm talking about, like, it's really cool to get on a high horse and talk about your principles when you have all the money in the world and you have everything and you can do it. But when you're down here and you want to get up there, sometimes principles are less significant. They're less important.
You sound like Tony Soprano or the Penguin, maybe, from the recent HBO series.
I don't know if I want to sound like either one of those people who are sociopaths.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is if I'm the Democrats, and here's the thing, I'm not saying the Democrats can control over these things, like they're pulling some puppet strings, but I think collectively, if you were thinking about this strategically, and that's what I'm trying to say, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. It just happens in this case, I was right. Like,
you were right.
Why are we doing this?
You were right. I would just say you're a little different. Like, okay, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but you're not going outside the bounds of the law. To do these things, and you wouldn't have. No,
but letting him go on these things would not have been outside the bounds of the law. When he lost that election, people wanted blood. They wanted blood, and they wanted it bad, and they wanted him to pay. And they didn't think about the recourse. What could happen when you do that? If you come up short, this is what you end up with. You end up with my president.
That's right. If you come for the king, you best not miss, right? From The Wire.
Yeah.
I think they missed, and the king is back. I think that the thing I go back to for all of this is, at the end of the day, America, yes, we have laws, right? We have the Constitution. We have a very thick criminal code. But a lot of it in our day-to-day lives, in the criminal justice system, and certainly in government, is not written down. A lot of it is nuance. It's custom. It's tradition. It's calling to concede on election night after a bitter campaign. It's peacefully transferring power. It's doing these things where sometimes there's a gray area, and it just comes down to the integrity of the people. That's what it is. And if you don't do that, and you push it to an extreme limit, as he did, then you really have to ask yourselves, I mean, the collective you, is there any recourse? Put aside whether you morally think it's right, put aside strategy. Do we collectively have a recourse if someone tries to essentially overthrow the government? Because remember, again, I go back to that impeachment trial. The argument McConnell and other people made was this is a legal matter. It's not impeachment. The law will take care of it for whatever was done, right? And then when it went to court, the argument was it's not a legal matter. It was a political thing. He has to be impeached and convicted. So that circular argument leads you back to no consequence, right?
Right.
And maybe that's the right answer. Maybe there is no consequence. Maybe in America, we just have a system where if something like that happens, we just let it go. And if it happens again, we'll have to let it go again. And maybe that's the right answer. But that's a hell of a conclusion to land on. It's really rolling the dice. It's like, well, you can go right up to the line and do pretty much whatever you want as long as you're not actually successful with the coup attempt. That's what we're saying. We're saying you can try to do your damnedest to use the power of the presidency to overturn an election, and there is no consequence for that. There's no political consequence. There's no electoral consequence. There's no legal consequence. I am uncomfortable with that. I'm going to be honest with you. As an American, I am not comfortable with that being
the last decade and change is probably what's left you uncomfortable with that. The previous 240 years, it
never came up, right?
No, it didn't come up.
And that's my point. But now it has. And so, and look, hopefully it won't come up again. Hopefully that was a one-time anomaly. We're all good. Knock on wood. But I would just say to you that I think we all know that if the outcome had been different 3 weeks ago, we would be in that bad place right now. We would be in it again.
Yeah.
And it would fail again. It probably would.
It would fail again. This is what I keep coming back to, is that I know this makes people uncomfortable because it was a little touch and go there in moments, but the guardrails held.
They did.
Like, as it would turn out, it was pretty well designed.
Yes, thank God. The brilliant men that did that back then, and thank God for that. But my point is, we are essentially saying then it's okay as long as you fail. As long as you come up short, then you will face no repercussion.
I don't know that it ever had a realistic chance of succeeding because it was so far separated from reality that I think, fortunately, again, when I talk about the guardrails holding, it was even people that maybe could benefit from the outside of reality coming true were like, yeah, I can't do that.
Right. They were. Enough of them were.
They had,
right.
You know what they had, Eric?
Enough of them were.
They had principles.
They did. They had principles. They had integrity. Thank God for Mike Pence. Who knows what world would be living in if he had made different decisions on that day. All right, Brian, I want to talk to you about a news story that came out today that definitely has some political overtones. Walmart, our largest retailer, I know you're a frequent shopper at Walmart. You like those rolled back prices. They are rolling back their DEI initiative. Walmart said it will no longer give priority treatment to suppliers owned by women or minorities. It will not renew a 5-year commitment for a racial equity center set up in 2020 after the police killing of George Floyd, and it pulled out of a prominent gay rights index. They are rolling back their diversity, equity, and inclusion, one of several companies that have made similar moves in the last year or so, facing lawsuits from various conservative organizations, and now, of course, with Trump coming into office. What's your take on this?
Well, I first want to quote CEO John Furner, who said, like many companies all across the United States, we've been on a journey, and we continue to be on a journey. End quote. Fuck this guy and his stupid ass journey. God, it's so annoying, man. Why is everyone on a journey? Why is every time that I turn on a show, people are on a journey? You're not on a journey. You're not that significant. Shut up. You're Walmart. You import cheap crap and you sell it for cheap prices. All right. End rant there. How do I feel about them rolling back their DEI was the question that you asked me.
I believe so.
Yeah. So I think companies that actually cared about diversity, equity, and inclusion will continue their programs, many of them successfully, many of them unsuccessfully, depending upon the program. And I think people who really didn't want them or care about them in the first place and thought they were a giant waste of money are more than happy to get rid of them. That is what I honestly think about it. So the greater question, and one I would pose to you, is do you feel like these DEI programs within organizations actually matter? Because they haven't been around long enough for like real data to come through. But I just, and this is my feeling. We can talk about our feelings now. I'm on my journey. Um, is that I think in larger organizations like Walmart, I think that DEI actually is important. I think as the companies get smaller and the communities get smaller, I think it matters less. But in our largest employer, Walmart, I do think that DI is actually important. But I'm not surprised they're rolling it back because it's going to save them tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's a no brainer decision. They're just going with which way the winds have taken them. And I the last thing I'll say on this, I have been super annoyed with major corporations taking political stances since they started taking them.
Right.
I don't care what Bagel Bites thinks about
Yes.
racism. I could care less. It doesn't matter to me. I just, are the Bagel Bites good? If they're good,
Yeah.
I'll buy them. If they suck, then I won't. So
Look,
I that was all over the place, and I'm rambling. But I'm not surprised by Walmart. This makes a lot of sense given the political wins. I think so.
my political feelings, I think, I made them clear kind of what I feel about Trump. But one of the reasons, there are several, that I'm not a Democrat, that I can't identify with that camp either, is things related to DEI and
Hmm.
kind of the obsession with race, sexuality, gender that I think is unhealthy. And I think this is yet another reaction to that. I think the Supreme Court ruling ending affirmative action in colleges in 2023 was a reaction to that. I think this is a
Yeah.
reaction to that. DEI is one of those terms that it's kind of like woke.
Yeah.
It means different things to different people.
Well, woke used
It
to be great. It
Well,
means you
that's
were
true.
aware of what was going on around you. You were
Right.
awake.
It's become a pejorative, but I also think it's become kind of a term that doesn't mean anything, kind of like woke, because it means everything, so it means nothing. So people aren't specific on what they're talking about. It's kind of like people throw out critical race theory is another one. So to me, I always want to know, okay, what specifically are you talking about? Because one company's DEI can be different than another. So I wanted to
Yeah.
know,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
okay, so what is Walmart actually doing? Right? What does this
Yeah.
mean?
Right. Right.
And so what they're doing, and I actually agree with this, they are no longer going to give priority treatment to suppliers owned by women and minorities. Currently, they give and that some agencies of the government do this too. And I think it's for a private company, if they want to do this, that's up to them. I don't think it's a good idea. I support Walmart ending that. Not because I don't like companies owned by women and minorities, but because I think we need to get away from this kind of thinking. And we need to, especially in government, it's essentially reverse discrimination. That's what it is. And I think that is part of what has fed. Like, there's a lot of reasons Donald Trump will be taking the oath
You're
of
gonna
office
make
on
me
January
take my
20th.
MAGA mask off, and I don't like it.
It's not one thing,
You're making
but
me uncomfortable right now.
but this is one of those. This is one of the things. People in America, many people, as Trump would say, not just white people, are coming to the conclusion that we shouldn't be so obsessed with race. And so I like that move. I think Walmart's doing the right thing. The other things they're doing, they are going to, this one I don't really necessarily agree with. They're ending a commitment to a 5-year commitment to a racial justice program.
Yeah.
That seems a
I
little
don't see why
unnecessary
that's
to
a
me.
part of employment
Yeah,
anyway. When I
I
saw that, I want to go back to the first thing that you
And
talked
I just
about.
I want to do the
Go ahead.
one more. They're also not participating in the Human Rights Campaign's annual benchmark index that measures workplace inclusion for LGBTQ plus employees, and they're going to stop marketing to children certain transgender related
That's
items. So
probably
those are the
wise.
actual changes that they're making.
Yeah, all those things will make them money. But anyway, I want to come back to why DEI is important and why giving preferential treatment to women-owned small businesses, minority-owned small businesses, why that actually is significant. And again, like I said, you're making me take my mask off here, which I don't love. I think that propping up, for the lack of a better term, some of these businesses, particularly in the last, let's say, 30 to 40 years, has been life changing for generations of people that we're talking about specifically because they were given an opportunity that they otherwise would have never had to participate in the system. And that's what we're really talking about. Is I get what you're saying. You're saying it's reverse racism, it's reverse preferential treatment. But just understand, if these things had not happened, that a lot of businesses and a lot of families and a lot of lives, their lives would be completely different had they not initially been given the opportunity to participate in the system in general over the last 30 or 40 years. I feel very strongly that, particularly as it comes to like you're talking about colleges now, right? How we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to give preferential treatment to
On
minority
the basis of
communities
race.
on the
Right.
basis of race. Okay, great. I think maybe that we are in a time and place where we don't really need to do that anymore, but we only got here because of the thing that we did in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. There are so many people, whether they're from Baltimore, like where I live close to, who never would have had a chance to go to college if some of
Yeah,
these
I
things didn't
agree.
exist. And now they're doctors and lawyers and politicians and contributing members of society that would have just been stuck in a
Yeah.
cycle of shit had these things not existed. So again, I'm sorry I had to take my MAGA mask off there. I really don't mind that Walmart is rolling these things back. I understand actually as a business why they would. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is I think that some of these programs over the last 30, 40, 50 years have had a very net positive. White people have not suffered because more Latinos and African Americans got anyone can go to college. Like
Well,
anyone.
no, I mean, at certain schools there's clear suffering. In fact, the people who brought the lawsuit were a lot of Asian parents because they
No,
were
no.
they were losing out.
Yeah,
Like there's only so many
hmm.
spots at Harvard, right? For instance, like
The-
somebody's getting those spots, which
I
means a
shouldn't have
lot of
said
people
that so
are.
definitively
I know
and
what you're saying,
but you
but
get what I'm saying.
look, I think systemic racism is real. I think that there have been programs that were specifically designed in a way that was discriminatory. The GI Bill, we had programs like redlining that hurt African Americans for a long time. And it was a terrible thing. And so I am okay with reaching out and trying to, like, for instance, if Barack Obama, or I'm sorry, if Joe Biden had selected a black vice president because he really wanted to do that, I would have been fine with that. What I didn't like was him saying, I am definitely going to select
No, and
a
you and
black
I
vice
have
president.
had this
Land,
conversation.
if you want to land on that result, land on it, but just don't say it up front. Now, in terms of college admissions, the way to fix that, because I agree, I want to see more diversity. The way to do it is do it based on income. Because if you do it based on
Yes.
income, you achieve the similar result. It won't be exactly the same, but you achieve a similar result demographically to race based, but you don't discriminate on the basis of race. That's the way to do it. Now, the reason these colleges won't do that is because they want, many of them, the wealthy
Oh, of course
parents
you
and
do.
the
You
wealthy
need
children.
those buildings aren't building themselves, man.
Right. So let's be clear that colleges could do that. There's nothing stopping Harvard from saying we are going to have 50% of our incoming freshman class be low income individuals. And that would accomplish the goal of bringing in more minorities and also more poor white kids who deserve a shot as well, and poor
Yeah.
Asian kids who deserve a shot as well.
I'll just end it with I know that there are a lot of people that are tremendously successful and very, very wealthy where this thing that we're talking about matters to them very much. I live in DC. I work with a lot of private schools, and there are individuals who are filthy rich and they don't give a crap about a new building. They don't care about a field. They won't donate money for anything else, but they will donate tons, millions and millions and millions of dollars to giving minority communities, poor families, to what you're saying, the opportunity to have the education that they benefited
Yeah.
from, to give those scholarships out to those people. And it can be a very divisive thing. Uh, and I understand that as well. But I just feel very strongly that these programs are really important and they will be going into the future. I mean, racism has not been solved despite
No.
all the ads in the NFL end zones.
We've
Like,
made tremendous progress, but I think the way to do it going forward, because I think we're generally getting to a consensus that race-based discrimination is not the way to do it. I think the way to do it is focus on income. It eliminates the racial element. It still has a similar net result to what you're trying to do, and it gets it to the people who really need it. Because look, in America today, the poor kid in Appalachia has a lot more in common with the poor kid in the black kid in the inner city than they have that's different between them. They both are facing a very, very difficult life potentially.
I had
And
someone
so
tell me at one point, no one has the market cornered on poverty.
that's true. That's
They
true.
don't. So
It's
I
the great
agree with you.
equalizer. And Walmart in terms of these companies, from what I've read, look, a lot of these women and minority owned companies are killing it. So Walmart, for like some of these, like especially like in the women's space, some of these makeup companies and others, they're still going to be getting suppliers from
Of
Walmart.
course.
It's not like Walmart's going to stop using women and minority companies. They're just not going to give them an advantage and
You're right.
preferential treatment.